You need to take responsibility for this case and resign." I was unable to accept Margaret's unpleasant face when she said that, so I firmly said, "We still haven't determined the main problem. It's too drastic to fire me." "The reason? Clearly, you made a mistake. It's only a question of time since you're already getting close to retirement." I silently snapped at her, knowing full well that she had no intention of investigating. Her tone was sarcastic. She was unaware that firing me would be the end of her career, possibly even her life. "Excuse me, Mr. President, I need to talk." I walked into the president's office without warning, and he was astonished. "Jameson, what is it? Why is that face so scary?" The president knew what was going on right now, but he never thought he would hear me say I was leaving. I gave him my resignation letter and gave him an explanation of our earlier talk. "Please, just calm down. What about your patents, though? Without them, the company will fail." "My patents. But because I've been let go, goodbye." I never would have thought that I would have a card that would completely reverse the situation so soon. I'm a 58-year-old systems engineer named Jameson. I have worked for this company for 30 years, mostly developing core systems for government and business organizations, IES. To stay current, we now concentrate on creating online store apps for businesses. Programmers and engineers now work in a more varied range of fields than in the past, and every generation brings with it a wealth of new knowledge. Nevertheless, in retrospect, it was worthwhile to go through the process of collaborating as a team to satisfy customers' expectations and expand the business. We get a lot of requests from businesses for app development because people these days prefer to shop online rather than in physical locations. Because of this, there is a severe engineer shortage in the business, and I was having everyday difficulties managing several projects. We also made an effort to train young workers, but the present generation of workers was unable to handle the demanding workload and frequently left before they had a chance to develop further due to regular late-night overtime and even remaining overnight during peak times. Numerous requests were made for the business to greatly enhance the working atmosphere. Even I, a dedicated employee who never got married, had begged for improved working circumstances, but eventually put up with the when in Rome attitude for decades. I've always thought that eventually someone would take action. I overheard an amusing talk among the HR workers one day while taking a break and smoking a cigarette. It appeared that a woman in her 40s would take over as HR director. Thoughtless HR head before, but what about this time around? I thought they would employ some bright engineers, put more money into sales and development, and assign it to my department. However, based on the talk I'd overheard, I was forced to abandon that dream. I was still busy and had forgotten about the unpleasant rumors a month after I first heard them. I was astonished to see that the budget for this month had been reduced by more than 30% one day when I was going over it. We were going to have to work unpaid overtime to achieve the project deadlines because of the drastically reduced labor budget. I limited the information since I knew how serious the situation was, and I went to HR to talk about the budget. I thought about the new HR head I had heard about in the smoking area while I was in the elevator. I felt depressed at the idea of meeting them. It was boisterous at HR when I got there. There was a woman who appeared to be the head of HR disputing with someone from another department. The man from the other division stormed by me as I got closer, obviously upset. I inferred from the discourse and tone that they had likewise made considerable cuts to their budget. "Excuse me, I'm Jameson from development, and I need to talk to the HR head." To keep things amicable, I made an effort to be as courteous as I could. "Had you scheduled a meeting?" She said it in a dismissive tone. "I'm busy." I was not one to give up lightly. "I apologize for abruptly troubling you. Jameson here from the development department. I have some inquiries concerning the budget for this month." The head of HR, Margaret, sat at her desk and widened her eyes for a time before speaking. "You're Jameson, I see. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I can't adjust the budget. I've recently started this job, so please don't add extra work that I don't need to perform." Her way of speaking to someone much older than herself, even if she held the higher position, was inappropriate. In addition, I've always felt that the funding for the development department is excessive. I've made multiple recommendations to my father, the president. Margaret's reckless demeanor astounded me. She obviously didn't comprehend the difficulties facing the development department, despite the fact that we worked for the same firm. Still, while drafting the budget, there ought to be some discussion with every department. We won't have enough money for overtime compensation under this budget. The caliber of our apps and systems will deteriorate as a result of our need to put in more unpaid time. Even though I knew it would probably not matter, I felt compelled to speak up. Then manage your employees to finish their work on time without overtime. Are you even qualified to make such statement? The head of our department and I don't get along. I manage a lot of projects, have a professional background, and am essentially in charge of the development department. Although I think I'm in a good situation, it's hard to make timely exits right now. Even though I knew nothing I said would change the situation, I couldn't help but speak when someone who wasn't aware of it did. You certainly seem impressive for someone without a title. You understand that you had a limited budget, so use your brain to finish the work. Then, please talk with Mike, our manager, about this more. I said, "Excuse me," not seeing a way out. I made the decision to back off. I have lived for more than 50 years, and I have never met someone so uncivilized and oppressive. I went to the smoking section to smoke a cigarette to help me relax. Though I told myself it would be a waste for someone like Margaret, I still felt like smoking 5 more. It's time to return. I went back to the development department and spoke with Mike, the manager, right away. He treated me as though I were an issue. "Jameson, did you go directly to the head of HR without telling me?" "Yes, you were away, so I took it upon myself to talk to her." Mike grumbled, obviously irritated by what I had done. He has never liked confrontation and has always tried to stay out of trouble. It's advisable to obey that HR chief. She became involved through contacts, became the president's daughter, and quickly advanced to her current position. She told me that just now, although I wasn't shocked. I had heard this story in the smoking section before. I couldn't figure out why they would put her in HR when she was trying to advance her career. Unpaid overtime is assured with this budget, but I don't want to be at odds with my superiors either. How will we proceed? Our developers would either crumble or scatter in droves as a result of this. We currently lack sufficient staff, so it would be disastrous to lose any more. We have no choice but to do unpaid overtime, but don't let the quality of the apps drop. Although I wasn't surprised, I was somewhat upset to learn that Mike and Margaret had the same opinion. This wouldn't sit well with the other engineers. After all, who works for money? Even though I got a bad feeling, I had to give up. From that point on, our staff worked on several projects and put in late hours every night to complete unpaid overtime. The money that was meant for system and app development instead went toward our benefits, overtime pay, and monthly paycheck. Margaret's tyrannical leadership destroyed our motivation and endangered our way of life. I can no longer stand to work like a dog, Jameson. I am at my breaking point. The younger staff members let out a stream of grievances and disappointments, saying, "I'm about to collapse." Although it's my responsibility to correct them, I feel as like I'm at the end of my rope and can't help them enough. And I've reached my limit. For what purpose are we even working? Margaret has absurd ideas for her finances. It makes sense why they would think so. The sales department has experienced significant budget cuts as well, but it is now unmanageable due to the increase in client projects and new company ventures. Both of us are about to go under. With Margaret's head, we've sunk to a new low even though we were already a dark company. I have no idea how to put that into words. I say, "Oh, Margaret, good work," as I walk by her in the corridor. Instead of replying to my greeting, she clicks her tongue. It appears that I am the only target of this attitude, maybe as a result of our earlier run-in. My colleagues and my subordinates' discontent increased every day, and by the time Margaret had been head for 6 months, resignations were commonplace. "Thank you so much for everything, Jameson," I'm leaving and returning to my hometown. It's too much for me anymore, he replies, sounding almost dead. Indeed, you've accomplished far enough. I'm grateful. I apologize for requiring you to work for such a corporation. First, rest well. Then, after you're feeling better, tend to your parents. Your life is only getting started, and you are young. Another important team member departed. Not only is the development department losing staff members, but other departments are also experiencing a wave of resignations. How much longer will things stay this way? Is it worth it to be employed at a company that has become an unending source of misery? Still, I won't be retiring for another few years. I'll persevere. I gave myself a pat on the back and returned to my computer. The development department was thrown into disarray one evening when a client reported a system issue. Jameson, we are going to immediately apologize to the client. Manager Mike quickly reminded me to get ready. Disappointed, I closed my laptop and pulled my tie back. When we went to apologize to the client, we were reprimanded for more than 2 hours rather than having a civil conversation. I was shocked as well. I had worked in this field for more than 30 years, and I had never received such a harsh punishment for a mistake. Future business transactions were reevaluated due to the malfunction's excessively large losses. However, it made sense. The development department was already overflowing with engineer resignations and collapses. It was not shocking that errors and glitches began to appear. Jameson, you really messed up. After the client raged at me on the train ride back, Manager Mike threw the blame at me, his subordinate. I apologized profusely. It escaped my notice during delivery. We got back to the office and I was called into HR right away. I thought the head would punish me in some way. I was probably really exhausted when I entered the elevator. I was annoyed with the entire corporation instead of feeling afraid. You called for me, I asked, turning to face Margaret. Jameson, stop acting as though you don't know. You made a grave error. Considering that she forced the resignation of important engineers and fostered an atmosphere where unpaid overtime was required, she had no right to make that claim. Even though the problem involved a client I was in charge of, instances like these are not unusual given the budget and manpower constraints. I shot back at Margaret, coolly and rationally. She is my superior, yet I couldn't allow her get away with it. With that attitude, are you saying it's because of my budget? She inquired. I believe it is one of the factors in this case, I said. Margaret's countenance contorted into anger, but I couldn't just take her reprimand in silence. I was beyond caring, but I could sense what she was going to say next. You need to take responsibility for this and resign, she insisted. I couldn't take Margaret's expression when she said that, so I firmly retorted, we haven't even determined the reason yet. It's too drastic to fire me. The reason? Clearly, you made a mistake. It's only a matter of time since you're almost retired anyhow, she remarked sarcastically. I silently lost it when I realized she was not going to investigate the true reason. Comprehensive. I'll provide my resignation letter to the president and let him know if you persist, I said. I hurried out of HR, returned to my development department workstation, and picked up my letter of resignation. It was something I had planned for a long time, in case I ever needed to give up. The president's office was the only place to go. I remarked as I walked in, "Excuse me, Mr. President. I need to talk." I burst into the president's office, startling him. "Jameson, what is it? Why is that face so scary?" he inquired. The president knew what was going on right now, but he never thought he would hear me say I was leaving. I gave him my resignation letter and gave him an explanation of our earlier talk. "Please, just calm down. What about your patents, though? Without them, the company will fail," he declared. "My patents? As I've been fired, goodbye," I answered. "What? It makes sense," I said as I left the president's office. "The systems and apps that account for 70% of the company's revenue cannot be operated or altered without me." I made my way directly to the smoking section. I would always come here to get my thoughts straight. The idea that I wouldn't be smoking here anymore made me feel sad. I started making plans to spend my latter years working as a freelance engineer because I had some savings. As I smoked and thought about this, a security guard came up to me. "Well done, Jameson. Why is that face so dejected?" he inquired. Well, it's really hard to say, but actually, I became rambling. He was about my age, and we used to hang out in the smoking section together. I told him about my firing, as well as the awful office atmosphere and the infamous HR head. That is the narrative. I was half exasperated already, so I tried to make it sound like a joke when I said, "I never thought I'd get fired so easily." "Jameson, that's just too much. You've experienced a lot." "Anyone would find it absurd," he retorted. He mentioned something unexpected just when I was relieved to vent to someone close. I was going to keep this to myself, but there's something about the head of HR that's been bothering me. "What about Margaret?" I inquired. His expression was pitiful as he started talking. One day, while I was monitoring the security cameras in the guard room, I saw a woman who looked like the head of HR hugging a man in a deserted warehouse. Hugging? I questioned, taken aback. "That kind of hug," he said in agreement. It was very amazing to watch on the security camera. Although I had heard gossip that she was attracted to guys, I never thought she would act in such a way while working. The man appears to be married. On his left hand, I noticed a ring-like brilliance. The security officer was somewhat relieved. "I decided to reveal this to you, Jameson, as it made me feel uneasy." Still, I was interested in the man. "When was this video recorded?" I asked. "I need to check something." "Let me see. Are you planning to go to the security room?" inquired the man. "Indeed. I've got nothing to lose because I was dismissed." I begged, "Please help me," and was let into the security room. Every 3 days or so, they have a covert meeting at the warehouse. "I've noted multiple instances and dates," he remarked. I grinned silently as he showed me the most recent footage. Manager Mike was the man who was hugging Margaret, and there was no doubt. Before leaving for home, I thanked the security man and received a copy of the troublesome film. The company can't function without me, but I feel like I've got to pull off one final major prank because I feel like I do. I never imagined that I would devise such a cunning scheme before to becoming 60. Planning my approach while having a cigarette at home, I sat at my workstation. I wanted to open a can of beer, but refrained to maintain my composure. I took a shower, made my plan for the next day, and went to bed. The grand finale takes place tomorrow. My head was filled with images of the company I had worked for so many years. The idea that I would be battling this alone after the firm failed me is pitiful and awful. Luckily, though, I had some fascinating cards to deal with now. I made the decision to embrace this battle and gave myself mental encouragement until I fell asleep. The weather was ideal the following morning, making it an appropriate morning for the battle. Knowing that this might be my last day at the company, I prepared myself resolutely and went there. I walked lightly. I arrived feeling calm despite my circumstances, only to discover the office in disarray. Anticipatedly, the customer was promptly contacted to arrange an urgent meeting to discuss the problems resulting from the system failure. The president gave the order, and the conference room with the screen served as the venue. "The meeting is in the evening." Mike, the manager, answered. With a little anxiety, he answered, "Yeah, it seems so." I questioned his level of comprehension regarding the gravity of the circumstance. I looked into the problem more over my lunch break and discovered that it had become a really concerning scenario overnight. I was tempted to tell him in private. My hand only grew stronger over time. It's likely that very few engineers in the development department realized how serious this issue was. I calmed down before the conflict by drinking black coffee and puffing on a cigarette in the designated smoking area. This is doable, I told myself. It was almost time. The president, executives, and managers from several departments were present when the meeting got underway. Even though I was let go yesterday, I took part in the activity as the director in charge. The substantial budget cuts that had been a source of worry over the previous 6 months contributed significantly to the malfunction, as they frequently resulted in the resignation of experienced engineers, which in turn led to poor system management. All I did was tell Margaret again what I had said earlier. Margaret, why was the budget cut so drastically? Margaret stumbled through a nonsensical response to reduce overtime and promote work efficiency. It was quite challenging to design and modify the absence systems with the limited funding. Without money for labor, working overtime without pay became the norm. Margaret was still silent. I noted as I urged her further. It really was amazing how hard she attempted to stand her ground against me. Overtime rose rather than decreased. Our restricted resources, fewer staff and less money, made our work even less productive. The executives knew that Margaret was a conceited person, and most of them nodded. I take it that's because Jameson lacks competence. It is merely scapegoating to blame the budget, she continued. Why is she not addressing Manager Mike's responsibility? Others began to question this, so I got up and moved in the direction of the projector. What are you doing, Jameson? Go back to your seat. Margaret gave the order. The buzz in the meeting room started. It makes sense, given that in this tight environment, I started fumbling with the projector out of the blue. Please, everyone, look at this. I made the decision to be thorough. What's this all about? Hold on. Wait. Margaret and Mike were shown on air having a private conversation. Although there was no audio, this kind of behavior at work was totally improper, especially in a solitary place. It was sufficient to be regarded as a serious infraction of professional conduct. Margaret, Mike, what is this? Mike and Margaret were devoid of expression and pallid. Johnson, you're married, aren't you? I wanted to emphasize that holding back had more to do with it than simply being married. No, it's not what appears to be. There is a miscommunication here, Margaret stumbled. It would be intriguing to observe how they provided an explanation for this. What do you mean by misunderstanding? I turned on the projector and moved on to the following video. This tape, which was taken on a later occasion, revealed Margaret and Mike having even closer contact. I'm not this person. It's not. Margaret appeared to be about to burst into tears, almost as she was breathing heavily. Enough, Jameson. Now switch it off. Mike made a demand. What are you talking about, Manager Mike? I changed to a different video on the projector. It showed Mike working on my computer in the development department by himself late at night. I was astonished to see this from the security guard. Even though I hadn't given him my password, it was easy to figure out how he was able to enter in at such a late hour. Manager Mike, who usually pushed work onto his subordinates, what were you doing alone in the office that night? All Mike could do was stay silent. Did he truly believe he would escape detection? Mike, I'd like to hear more from you later. Is that okay? I inquired. I was the one that broke the system for the client that day. In the conference room, most individuals were in disbelief. Margaret murmured, I thought if I kept slashing the budget, people would quit and Jameson would be exhausted and break down. After a minute of awkward quiet. However, I recommended it since he was too strong. Thus, Margaret was the one who suggested to Mike that there was a system error. I couldn't tolerate it that you were more capable than me and that your colleagues trusted you. Surprisingly, I was briefly tempted when Manager Mike openly admitted his feelings. I couldn't help but worry that you'd surpass me and become more influential in the company. Manager Mike couldn't look me in the eye, so he focused his attention on my tie. So when I gained power, I decided to get rid of you for Mike's sake. Margaret, in contrast to Mike, gave me a straight glance that was twisted into a look of loathing and rage. Their looks were disgusting and horrifying at the same time. In a nutshell, you two desired that I leave the company. After all these years of making contributions to the organization, why did I have to be let go? Even though I was furious as hell, I was done. Now, about the system malfunction you two orchestrated, I went on. I looked into it earlier, and it appears the damages to the client company amount to millions of dollars. What? Not at all. Millions? Margaret paled, realizing that by telling her beloved what to do, she had ruined everything. When it finally hit him, it was too late. What? Millions? Is that accurate? Mike inquired. Yes, these are preliminary figures, but I'm astounded by their collective stupidity. I responded. Manager Mike carried it out, but Manager Margaret, who gave the orders, is equally guilty. May I ask how you plan to handle this? Margaret said, I'm at a loss for what to do. You need to fix it. Well, since I was fired by you yesterday, there's nothing I can do about it, I replied. Margaret's cheeks reddened with rage, but she was unable to respond right away. You think you can handle this, Mike? You carried out the task. Ultimately, Margaret went on, assigning her beloved the responsibility. Mike was clearly disturbed by what had been spoken at this moment. What topic are you discussing? The commands came from you. Besides, without Jameson's approval, we are unable to make systemic changes. What? Margaret asked in shock. I was unaware of the patents. I had designed and patented the malfunctioning client system 30 years prior. Therefore, it cannot be fixed without me. You get it now, Margaret? I stated. The executives and the president were in disbelief and seemed to disappear inside the conference room. Our client has lost millions of dollars. This is terrible. While the president was aware of the patents, it's unlikely that he anticipated such a disastrous outcome. I'll use my power to revoke your termination. Just swiftly fix the system. Sorry, but I've already handed in my resignation to the president, so it's too late. Margaret's mouth fell open in silence. At this time, her haughty manner was almost impressive, even while she was appealing. Wait, Jameson. All I did was accept the resignation. He turned to face his daughter and urged her to kneel, saying, Please forgive this foolish daughter. Why should I have to kneel to this guy? You knave. Do you not recognize how serious this situation is? Express your genuine regrets. Still, I wasn't into kneeling or a forced apology. I apologize sincerely. Kindly think it over again. Margaret seemed to have never apologized from the bottom of her heart, based on her phony apology. Could you maybe think it over and aid the company, Jameson? If you remedy this, we'll void the dismissal and extend an executive post offer to you. I had been taken advantage of for decades, so such kind remarks had no effect on me. I'm leaving the company already, even if you decide to overturn the dismissal. An employee who has made the decision to leave cannot be persuaded otherwise. Both of their features went dark at that very moment. Hold on. You won't assist us after all this apologizing. It all began as a result of you. Isn't it wonderful that you can now reduce the budget even further without me? Margaret couldn't say anything. She did not reply. Besides, your dear manager Mike will figure it out even without me. Maybe you could generously boost the development department's funding after he repairs the system, which would satisfy everyone. Stop joking around. Perhaps they were so enraged by me that all they could do was vomit out crude comments. Perhaps this should come to an end. Margaret, you are the one who has been playing around all along. Oh, and you may want to refrain from acting strangely at work going forward. Farewell. I quit the company where I had worked for more than 30 years after making that final statement. Margaret's angry yells could be heard behind me as I left the conference room, but I fortified myself and turned away. If I did, I thought her face would have a very scary expression on it. The very thought of it unnerved me. 3 months had gone by since I left the company, and time had flown by. I'd eventually used a resignation service to effectively depart after receiving countless calls and letters attempting to bring me back. I discovered via the news that the incident had resulted in the total termination of our company's relationship with the client, so giving rise to substantial demands for compensation. It's obvious that they've given up trying to improve the system. I wonder if they have the funds to develop a successor system, but it will be interesting to watch how it is constructed. I kept in touch with the security guy, and when I left, we would occasionally get together at an inexpensive beer hall to discuss rumors about the company. It turns out that there was a romantic relationship between Margaret and Mike. Margaret, it seems, slashed the budget to drive me, the ace, to the breaking point since her darling Mike thought I was a bother. Looking back, it seemed very strange that despite everything, Manager Mike's pay hadn't improved all that much. Everything made obvious now. Margaret's father, the president, would likely pay the compensation, but it appears that Mike's wife learned of their relationship, which has caused further financial and emotional hardship for them both. Although the security guard was unable to determine how it was found specifically, it was sufficient information to regale others over a few beers. The company is going to fail in a few years because my patents powered my other apps and technologies that are no longer useful for business. Nevertheless, neither Margaret nor the president posed the greatest threat to the organization. Without a doubt, that was the security guard. I didn't hunt for a new career after leaving the company and went back to my hometown. As I'd approached 60, I made the decision to inherit my parents' home and live out the rest of my days in the country. I hadn't been able to see them while they were still living, but it's great to have a hometown you can go back to. As an engineer, I've worked with computers and other technologies in buildings for years, but I'm not sure what I should do next. My ability to work as a freelance engineer is enhanced by the patents and abilities I have acquired. There won't be a problem with money for long because I have enough saved to live well for almost 10 years without working. I'm free right now. I have few happy memories from the decades I have spent concentrating only on my profession. There may have been a few, but they didn't make a significant impact. I've always desired to pursue an endeavor outside of engineering. Perhaps I'll take a part-time job at a convenience shop or restaurant. It could be fun to open my own tavern or beer hall. If I do, I'm going to make the kind security guy my first client. I've relieved myself of the weighty responsibilities. I'll live the remainder of my life with greater freedom, as though I'm making up for lost time.